Welcome into Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, I'll tell you what I'm looking forward to hearing from President of Baseball Operations Dave Dombrowski's press conference today, and we'll do a little bit of a recap of our poll from this weekend. All of that on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas, former collegiate, semi-pro baseball player, and I should say pitcher. People like to differentiate between pitchers and position players, but played baseball my whole life, been talking Philadelphia sports and the Phillies, specifically for 97.5 The Fanatic over on the radio side. Happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and a big press conference coming up later today for the Philadelphia Phillies. Dave Dombrowski is going to speak with the media later this afternoon, and he's going to discuss numerous things. He's going to field questions from the assembled media, and I want to talk you through the main things I'm looking forward to hearing from Dave Dombrowski, President of Baseball Operations for the Philadelphia Phillies, when it comes to his end-of-the-year presser following what was an exceptional season for the Philadelphia Phillies. They went to the World Series, for goodness sake. The top two team in baseball, yeah, it's a pretty good finish. Obviously not how you want the season to finish with losing in Game 6 to the Astros, but let's jump into what I'm looking for from Dave Dombrowski. First and foremost, and we already talked about this at length on Friday's episode, Bryce Harper's elbow injury. How has it been handled so far? What's the latest? Do we have a time frame for when we expect him back? Do we have a time frame for a surgical procedure? What in the world is going on with Bryce Harper's elbow? That is concern number one. So I'm sure he will be asked about that, maybe multiple questions, and I'm interested to see what Dombrowski tells us. Now, here's the interesting thing about Dave Dombrowski, and you kind of learn the personalities of people when you cover teams, when you watch them interact with media, and you know who you're going to get information out of and who you're not. Dave Dombrowski isn't entirely candid, like, say, if you're into the Philadelphia sports scene. Daryl Morey of the Philadelphia 76ers will tell you exactly what he's thinking, exactly what he's doing. Whether that's a good strategy or not, that's just his personality. He's very open. And he won't say, hey, we're going to trade for this guy, but he'll be very candid with you. Dave Dombrowski is not totally like that, but he's also not, I'd say the other end of the spectrum is Howie Roseman, who will never give you anything. So I'd say Dave Dombrowski splits the middle between those two. You will get some information from Dave Dombrowski and what he's thinking. He's a guy that's been around a lot, so you're going to get sound bites. It's not going to be one of those press conferences where it's like, I just listened to this guy for 20 minutes and he didn't say anything. And we're going to learn some stuff. So hopefully he will be open about what's going on with Bryce Harper and give us a good time frame for when we can expect him back, or a general idea of just what's going on with that injury. So that's number one. Number two is kind of joint, because this is not just Dave Dombrowski. This is also John Middleton. But I'd be very interested to know where the target point is for how much they're willing to spend this offseason. You've already committed a significant amount of money to Bryce Harper. We know that. That's kind of where it started. And JT Realmuto got his big contract. Zach Wheeler got a big contract. Then you got and you signed Kyle Schwarber and you signed Nick Castellanos. You got a lot of money committed to this team already. How much more are you willing to commit? Is this offseason hey, we can bring in Trey Turner, but then we're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel for relievers and starting pitching help and everything else? Is it, hey, we believe we can go get Turner and Rodon? And I don't think he's going to say this specifically, but the numbers will give us an idea. Is it, hey, we can get Turner, Rodon, Yoshida, let's ball out. Let's be the highest payroll in baseball. We proved that we were competitive because we went to the freaking World Series this past year, guys. So, yeah, John Middleton's going to spend some money. You guys better fill up the seats and pay him back for it, because we're going to put a really competitive baseball team out on the field in Philadelphia. That would be awesome. I don't think that's the likely option, but I'm interested to see if anyone asks, and if they do, what Dave Dombrowski's answer is about the general framework for how much they're willing to spend and how aggressive they're going to be in free agency. Now, that's another aspect outside of the money, how aggressive you're going to be in free agency. And that's something that I'll also be interested in. There can be situations, and I don't think Dave Dombrowski is this type of GM, or I call him the GM. The GM is Samfold, president of baseball operations, rather, but he's running the show. I don't think he's the type of front office executive that feels this way because he's a very established guy that's had success multiple places. But sometimes when you have success with the team that you put together, you can get complacent and say, hey, we just went to the World Series. We have all the guys that we need to compete right here. I don't feel like I need to change that much or bring that many more players in or anything like that. I don't think that's what we're going to hear from Dave Dombrowski today. But I'm interested to see, just to hear him talk about how this team did this year and what he needs to do to improve the team for next year. Because a conversation that's starting to be had and will continue throughout the offseason is, yes, they went to the World Series. That's awesome. Yes, they got hot at the right time. Great. But they finished third place in their division behind two 100-win teams. They won 87 games, 13 games to make up on the Braves and the Mets. It's not that they're going to be the same teams either, because who knows where Jacob deGrom goes, who knows where Dansby Swanson goes. Those teams will have turnover as well. But hey, the pressure to compete with them in division, you don't want to be a wild card team every time and have to go play a three-game series on the road somewhere. You want to compete for the NL East because now you believe that you're talented enough to. And you got to go get the pieces to prove that. So the aggressiveness in the offseason will be another thing that I'm listening for when I hear from Dave Dombrowski later on today. And I'm also kind of want to have, I imagine someone will ask the question, but Yoshida coming out of Japan, who's basically said he wants to play for the Phillies and has a connection with really caring about Bryce Harper and everything like that. What the thought process is there. Is it and we'll see how it works out. Is it we're aware of the situation and we're discussing things? Is it yeah, we'd love to have him, trying to make something happen, because it seems like he wants to be here and it seems like there could be an opening for him with the Bryce Harper injury. So the thoughts on Yoshida out of Japan would be very interesting to me as far as the Dave Dombrowski presser today. Now, you're going to get all kinds of other stuff. How comfortable are you with Rhys Hoskins at first base? Is that a position that you think you need to address, considering he's in his last year of his deal and what he brought defensively to the ball club, or didn't bring defensively to the ball club this past season? How do you feel about your starting pitching depth? Where does the bullpen stand in your mind? There's all general questions that every GM is going to get. And our president of baseball ops, front office executive, you know what I mean, are going to get. So how Dave Dombrowski handles that will give us a glimpse into what his plan will be for the offseason. So you know how a couple episodes ago I laid out my blueprint for the Philadelphia Phillies offseason, what I would do if I was in charge. Well, Dave Dombrowski is now going to give us, not in as clear words as I said it, but in answering questions today, we're going to get his, and by turn, the Philadelphia Phillies blueprint to the 2022-2023 offseason. So we're going to hear his thoughts on everything that we've talked about. Trey Turner, Rodon, Yoshida, trading Rhys Hoskins, starting pitching depth, add to the bullpen, how everybody played this past year, what he thinks he did well to get the team to that point, what he thinks he could be doing better. All of this stuff is going to be great. And the one last thing, I don't need to be convinced on this, but I'm still interested to hear it. What was the difference between Joe Girardi and Rob Thompson? Why such a stark difference in how this team performed under one or the other? Because, yes, you could say Rob Thompson made better managerial decisions. He absolutely did. But there was more to it than that, and some type of connection with the locker room and the organization that we heard mention of. With the dust settled, though, and knowing that he's a manager that brought them to the World Series, I'm very interested to hear about the thought process going into the move to make him the manager, the thought process in giving him a 2-year deal, and now what you can learn from that decision to help Rob Thompson continue to be a great manager for the Philadelphia Phillies. So a packed slate for Dave Dombrowski of questions to answer, and that's just me. he's going to have to deal with the entirety of media who have come up with questions that I'm sure extend beyond the reach of what I've just covered in the past 10 minutes. So we'll keep an ear out for Dave Dombrowski and what he's going to talk about in his end-of-year press conference today. And it should be really exciting for us to get an idea of where this team and organization is heading over the next couple of months. Now, coming up next, we're going to do another player review for the 2022 season. Another one of the main contributing players, as we're still just breaking into the player reviews. A lot of the folks who do host Locked On MLB podcasts have been doing this for a month now, so they had plenty of stuff to get into. The Phillies were a little bit busy going to this whole World Series thing, so didn't get into it when everyone else started, but I do want to continue that as we review what was an interesting and exciting 2022 season with some players that deserve praise and some others that deserve a little bit of criticism. So we'll talk about one of the other main contributors to the Phillies in 2022 coming up next as we continue our season reviews. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today to learn more about the trends in action. You can use your mobile device. BetOnline. It's where the game starts. Time for a player review for 2022. We're just doing one today because we have Off the Poll coming up. I'll tell you about that in just a little bit. But the player who we're reviewing today, Kyle Schwarber, the Philadelphia Phillies left fielder, sometimes DH early in the season before Bryce Harper fully took over that role. And, well, your National League winner of the Silver Slugger Award for a left fielder, your National League winner for the home run title, 46 home runs on the year. I mean, this guy almost hit 50 homers. I think, honestly, the Aaron Judge chase in the American League overshadowed how good Kyle Schwarber was this year for the Philadelphia Phillies. He was sixth in baseball in walks. That's incredible. He was first in the National League in home runs, second in all of baseball in home runs with 46. He's brought in to be a slugger, and that's what he was for this team. That's the positives, and they're huge positives. And June Kyle Schwarber is still another level. Hoagie Fest Kyle Schwarber, Schwarber Fest is another level as well. He was big in the playoffs for them, had some huge moments. That ball he hit at Petco Park against the San Diego Padres in the NLCS, I still don't think has landed. I don't know what more to say about Kyle Schwarber's power. Here's the drawback that everyone has talked about with Kyle Schwarber. So he batted .218 this past year. He slashed .218, .323, .504 with an .827 OPS. It's not bad numbers at all for a power hitter who's going to give you 46 home runs. .218, you'd like to see that higher, but if you're going to hit .218 and you're going to lead Major League Baseball with 46 home runs, or Major League Baseball, lead the National League, rather, with 46 home runs, we'll take that in the modern game. But as a leadoff hitter, is that what you want? He had 200 strikeouts this year. Not great. Leading baseball, leading the league, terrible. 200 strikeouts from your leadoff hitter is not great. That's an understatement. It's terrible. You can't have a guy bat leadoff that's going to strike out 200 times. You also can't have a guy bat leadoff that's going to bat .218. Not setting the table enough for other guys. But 94 RBIs, 46 homers. That points to the leadoff issue, right? 46 home runs should basically be an automatic 100 RBI season. How he had 94 just speaks to the fact that, well, leadoff home runs in a situation where you don't have guys setting the table for him. I was a proponent of Kyle Schwarber batting leadoff for the Philadelphia Phillies. I still kind of am, unless, of course, Trey Turner comes in here and then it's absolutely his spot. But barring the addition of someone who you're sure can hit in the leadoff spot, I don't hate him there because he walks, sees a lot of pitches. He can leave the yard, but he's a guy that works pitchers, and he's very comfortable as a leadoff hitter for the Philadelphia Phillies or any team in Major League Baseball. I don't know that he's better served as a cleanup hitter or 3-hole or 5-hole or wherever else he would hit. But if you can have someone who's elite at the leadoff position, then you got to move him out of it because of those things we just talked about. Defensively, Kyle Schwarber, as we go through the recap of his 2022 season, he wasn't great, but we knew he wasn't going to be great. I think both him and Nick Castellanos, and maybe it's because Rhys Hoskins took so much of the blame about defensive issues at first, but I think Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos held their own defensively for the Philadelphia Phillies. They're not exceptional. They're not going to make any highlight reel plays unless you're Nick Castellanos in the playoffs and decide that you want to actually focus, which is what he said. He doesn't. He loses focus sometimes in the regular season, but these guys don't often make highlight plays. But I think they were solid enough considering. And now with Brandon Marsh in center field, you can get away with having rough defense in the corners of the outfield because Marsh covers so much ground in center field. So defensively, I didn't have any issue really with Kyle Schwarber based on his reputation. Would you like a better fielder in left field? Absolutely. But is that better fielder going to hit 46 home runs? If you're weighing the pros and cons, Kyle Schwarber is pretty darn good in left. Yeah, he was a monster at the dish this year for the Phillies. The only problem is, how do you feel with him batting leadoff? And I don't think that's his fault. I think that's more of a philosophy of the team and not having someone else who slots in that role very well. The guy who I think slots in best, the two guys that slot in best for the Philadelphia Phillies in that role would be Bryson Stott, 1, and Brandon Marsh, 2. And you look at those guys. Bryce Stott was a rookie. That's a tough spot to put him in, even though he had some really big at-bats. Having a rookie bat lead off is a lot of pressure where you want him to be able to adjust to Major League Baseball. Brandon Marsh, also a young player and a guy whose swing you're fixing. You don't want to do that when he's batting lead off for your team. So neither of those guys really seem to fit in. Gene Segura, there was attempts in previous years when he was with the Phillies to bat him lead off, and he just never really fit into that role, partially because he's a little bit too aggressive for a leadoff hitter. Yeah, it just kind of had to be Kyle Schwarber. And I'm not saying it has to be this next season. I'm just saying I don't think it was as terrible as everyone treated it. And hopefully the Phillies still upgrade at the leadoff spot by bringing in a Trey Turner. What was his special moment of the year, Kyle Schwarber? Because you could say, you can point to a home run in the World Series, but you end up losing the game in Game 6, and it was a monster home run. It was hugely important for them, but it doesn't matter if they end up losing. I'm going to tell you, the seminal moment for him was hitting that Yu Darvish slider nearly 500 feet at Petco Park, the longest home run in the history of that park, because that was kind of the – and I know you were already up 1-0 off of Bryce Harper's opposite field home run, but Schwarber's was kind of like he just hit the ever-living you-know-what out of that ball. We're awake. We're zoned in. Darvish has been good, but we're going to mash. So for me, that is the moment of the season for Kyle Schwarber, was that home run at Petco Park. I know he had moments in the World Series as well, but I point to that as the lasting impression from Kyle Schwarber's season. When you're in a 1-0 ball game and you're not hitting a guy well, he can win you a game with one swing because he can hit it a mile. That's what he is. And maybe that doesn't make him a leadoff hitter to you, and maybe it shouldn't. But at least for this year, a really solid year for Kyle Schwarber. And I'm actually going to give Kyle Schwarber an A. I know, how do you give an A to a guy 200 strikeouts? Because he almost hit 50 damn home runs. And the leadership he showed at points this year was hugely important for this team. I think he brought something to this team that they didn't have, a World Series winner in the past and a guy who's in the part of his career where he becomes more of a leader because he's been around the block a couple times. Hugely important on and off the field for this team. Kyle Schwarber is getting an A for his season with the Philadelphia Phillies. So that's our player review for today. Coming up next, we're going to wrap up Locked On Phillies with a look back at our Off the Poll question from Friday. Off the Poll is a segment where we ask a poll question on Twitter at @LO_Phillies. I retweet it from my account at Connor Thomas 975. And I don't tell you what I would pick. Get your responses, and then I'll respond to it in Monday's show, which today is Monday's show. So I'll be responding to the question. which of the top 4 shortstops available in free agency are you most interested in the Phillies signing? Runaway winner, like we projected, but the extra data is something that interests me very much. So we'll discuss that next as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. All right, off the poll time. So it's time to recap our Twitter poll. I just told you about it, but I'll tell you again. You can find our off the poll questions at LO_Phillies on Twitter, at Connor Thomas 975 on Twitter. We tweeted this out Saturday morning and gave you guys all a day to respond to it. Had a good number of responses to the Twitter poll. And again, I'll just remind you what the Twitter poll was. And first, I have an apology to make. I spelled Trey Turner's name wrong. Spelled it Trae Turner instead of Trea Turner. That's on me. It's also Trey Young's fault for spelling his name the wrong way and me having that auto-corrected in my phone now. So my apologies. But the off-the-poll question for this past weekend was, which of the top 4 free agent shortstop do you most want the Phillies to sign? And the options were in alphabetical order by last name: Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa, Dansby Swanson, and Trey Turner. Now, I know what you're thinking if you're just hearing this question for the first time. It's a stupid question. Obviously, it's going to be Trey Turner. And yes, Trey Turner won easily. But I was interested in the gap between Trey Turner and the next closest option, and then how the other options broke down. So 77 votes on this one, a lot of responses. Trey Turner took home 87% of the vote, which is unbelievable. And he's the best shortstop available. I think we all feel that way. So, yeah, that's the guy that most of you said they're interested in the Phillies bringing in. That's my guy as well. Second place, 9.1% of the vote went to Xander Bogaerts. People are really coming around on Xander Bogaerts as the second best option for this team. Now, he's a very, very good player, solid defensively. He's got power. He's a guy that you can put at shortstop and have an immediate upgrade. A really good player that was on some really good Boston Red Sox teams and is playoff proven and everything like that. Bogaerts is a nice player. I get why 9.1% would say that. I'm interested, though, in the difference between him and Trey Turner. The drop-off is huge, which is kind of what you assume it would be between those two. But really, this is going to be, we're reaching the situation where people will say now, oh, we won't be disappointed if you end up with Xander Bogaerts. I think 87% to 9% shows that there will be a bit of disappointment if Trey Turner's not in red pinstripes when the 2023 season begins. Bogaerts a nice player, though, 9.1%. Dansby Swanson only got 2.6% of the vote, and Carlos Correa, 1.3%. There's just not a lot of interest in Dansby Swanson or Carlos Correa being on the team. I get you can only pick one, right? So people may be like, yeah, those guys are fine, but they're going to vote for Trey Turner in the poll. It's just interesting to me that Carlos Correa only got 1.3%, Dansby Swanson only 2.6%. So there's a clear 2 favorites, even though Xander Bogaerts is way far down compared to Trey Turner. It's clearly a 2-man race. And then if those guys fall through, we'll take Correa. We'll take Swanson, which, yeah, just some interesting data points from the poll, and that's why we ask them. That's why we get into it. So Turner or bust, Bogaerts as a second option, and the other two, I guess if no one else, neither of the top 2 work out, like we'll take them. But clearly there's a gap between Turner and the next, and Bogaerts, and then the next after that, which would be Swanson and then Correa. An interesting off the poll. That's why we do it, right, folks? And a fun episode of Locked On Phillies. That's my time for today. So I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen. The biggest breaking news in all of sports. They may be talking a little Joel Embiid, who had a 59-point performance for the Sixers last night. 59, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, and 7 blocks has never been done before. So I'm sure some stuff on that. The Eagles play tonight, so maybe tomorrow it'll be the Monday Night Football game. But Locked On Sports today is your latest breaking news on all sports, all over the place. And it's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you for checking out Locked On Phillies, wherever you get your podcast, YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing, rating, reviewing, all that good stuff. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Next episode of Locked On Phillies.